Lechi lach to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha to a place you do not know. Lechi lach on your journey I will bless.
If you have any questions for Akiva, please type them in the chat. Or if you have any questions for me, type them in the chat and Akiva will answer them when he wants to, probably at the end is how we usually do it. So just a little bit on Akiva. He's spoken to us, I think, twice before at this point. We like him so much, we keep inviting him back. He's worked in the field of Jewish and Israel education for 20 years. In addition to guiding students around Israel, Akiva leads tours to Poland to teach children about the Holocaust or to teach people about the Holocaust. He is the editor of the book Becoming Israeli, a compilation of blogs and essays that speak of the inspiring and sometimes wacky and crazy experience of making Aliyah. Akiva himself made Aliyah in 2004. And I know he also is an educator and has been working on some courses that he will talk to us about coming up. So Akiva, thanks so much for speaking to us again.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. Really good to be here. Hello, everybody. Shalom, shalom from Israel. And I hope everyone's doing well. I know in some parts of America, things have been crazy with the weather. So just wishing everyone well, safety, most importantly. And yeah, let's jump right into things. You heard my background. You heard where I'm coming from. I'm really excited to share tonight or today about the upcoming holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And like Alana said, if anyone has a question, just put it in the chat. I probably won't see it as I'm sharing, but we'll look at it at the end together. And Alana, if you see a question that's really like should be asked right away, feel free to barge on in and interrupt me and share the question.
Will do.
Okay. Like Alana said, the past year, 1 year ago, I left my full-time job of 13 years teaching, visiting students in America all about Israel and Jewish history, and I went online and I've been spending the last year doing a lot of education online, which has been an incredible experience and journey. So right now in the chat, I'm going to just put my own website. It's called @Israel. It's becomingisrael.com/@Israel. Becoming Israel was my original website for my book, but I'm using it mostly now for my online education work. And you can see there, you can sign up for my weekly newsletter. I write about things, all things Israel, Israeli history, culture, and society. You can sign up for the newsletter there. And also you'll see right on the front page there, you'll see a click for something called Israel School. I have a couple of courses specifically designed for youth, all about Israeli history and culture, and also how to deal with things like BDS. It's a whole other course. But you'll see very soon, check back in a couple of days, I have an adult version of the Israel School that I'm starting to offer very soon. It's a 6-class series, all about understanding the story of Israel's establishment, survival, and success. So that's going to be a course specifically for adults, and you can check that out. Let's jump into the topic at hand. And it's really one of my favorite things to learn about and to teach about and to share about is these upcoming holidays. You know, if you look at the Jewish calendar, there's nothing quite like this time of the year. And, you know, my wife, when she was in college, she had a couple of very close friends who were not Jewish, and she would always make fun of her. But like, there's always a Jewish holiday coming up. You know, she was always like taking off or going back home to Philly for something. And on some level, obviously, that's very true. But the month of Tishrei, right, the fall time, is really, really unique in that we have this whole series, one after another, of holidays. You're in Israel, maybe you've been here for the holidays and you've heard it or you've heard about it. But, you know, at this point in the year, if you try to get anything done, everyone will tell you, Acharei Chagim, Acharei Chagim, Acharei Chagim, right? We'll talk to you after the holidays. Like, you can't plan anything right now, right? Everyone like uses that as an excuse. They've been saying it for the past month. And it's just like, you know, there's so much going on. There's so much to get ready for that people have a hard time, you know, even like thinking about everyday life until after the holidays. Even literally, my daughter just started a new school yesterday. September 1st here is when schools open up. And, it said in one of the notices we got on WhatsApp, it says, books will be given out achrei chagim, after the holidays. We have so few days of learning during September that they're like, yeah, we're not even going to give out the books, and that's like in a month, like after the holidays is like a month from now. So it's kind of really funny, but it's really, really built into modern Israeli society. It's quite an amazing thing, I think. So let's jump in. What the structure of how I'm going to do this class is I'm going to talk a little bit about each holiday, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot separately. There's a million things to talk about each one of them. We literally can be here for weeks non-stop talking about all the different facets of these holidays. But I picked a couple to a few for each holiday that I want to highlight and talk about. And then at the end, we'll kind of bring it all together and see how they fit together into this journey, right? When Julie and I were talking about this topic in this course, we were talking about how really this is a Jewish journey at the beginning of the year. And more specifically, I would call it a Jewish spiritual journey. Judaism really wants us to start off in a certain kind of way. Of course, festive and celebratory and family and friends and getting together and all those parts. And those are very important parts as well. But as I hope that we're going to see as I share, that there's really deep spiritual things happening. So I hope you're ready for that. I hope you're open to that. I hope you're okay with that. But I'm going to be sharing primarily spiritual teachings about each of the holidays. And that's going to really be our focus right now. So let's jump in, okay? Rosh Hashanah, all right? First of all, every year I have this thought. We're just a few days from Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. This is the New Year's Day, right? In the Jewish calendar, in the Jewish tradition, in Judaism. And I like to think of, wow, how different, the Jewish New Year's is than the secular New Year's. And it's not to put anything down, it's not to judge, but it's just to notice the differences, right? You think about New Year's, right? New Year's Day in the general world. What do people do? They make preparations. They make preparations like making what's the word? Hazmana, not an invitation, but an order, a reservation. All right, a reservation at a restaurant. You pick who you're going out with. Where you're going to be at 12 o'clock. What you're going to do. How you're going to sleep in the next day. All those things, and it's great and it's fine and it's not a bad thing. That people do all these things, but it's an interesting thing to notice the difference between that and the Jewish New Year. The preparation for the Jewish New Year starts a month before, with the beginning of the month of Elul, right, the last month of the Jewish calendar, and the whole month of Elul, according to Jewish tradition, is supposed to be dedicated to self-introspection, looking at ourselves. What did I do this year? How did I do? Right? Notice all the great things that I did and we did, but also let's be honest, there are things that either I missed or I messed up or, I didn't do well at all or I could have done better. And really using this time to reflect, right? To wind down the year with reflection on the year we just had, while also simultaneously looking forward to the year that we're coming into, right? And what kind of year do I want to have? And what do I want to bring from the old year or past years into the new year, and what do I want to leave behind? That's an idea that we'll come back to a little bit later. So we have a whole month of preparation, not like where we're going to eat dinner, or where we're going to be at 12 o'clock, but, who am I? And what kind of year have I had? And what kind of year do I want to have in this new year that's coming up? During the month of Elul, we blow the shofar. There's a tradition to blow the shofar every single day except for Shabbat, for the entire month of Elul. And it's a wake-up call, right? You hear the shofar, and you're like, oh, right, it's the end of the year. Oh, man. Time to, straighten myself out and remember, all those things I told myself last year that I was going to do, and all that kind of introspection kind of stuff, right? We blow the shofar every day of the month, and it's this really, really powerful ritual. It only takes a few moments. But every day, ideally in the morning, to start your day with that shofar blast, as that wake-up call, it's really powerful. Again, in Israel, it's really interesting, funny, and unique. All throughout this month, you hear the shofar being blown. Morning, afternoon, even nighttime, I've heard it, right? And people just go around the country just blowing the shofar, to bring the spirit of this time into the everyday life, right? That's what it means. That's one of the ways it means that Israel is a Jewish state. So the blowing of the shofar is a really important piece. of this time period, of this reflection period. Again, just this idea of reflecting on the past and looking forward to the future. It's this really kind of in-between time. It doesn't mean that we're not still getting stuff done, right? We're still doing stuff. People going to work, kids are starting to go to school, but like we talked about just before, it's kind of like this pause in the year. Like, yeah, we're going through the motions, but we're not really getting anything done because we're going to wait till, as we said, Achrei Chagim, right? But let's go to Rosh Hashanah itself. That was all the preparation. Rosh Hashanah, as compared to all the other holidays, is a very interesting holiday. Why? Because the Torah, where we learn about all the holidays, barely says anything about Rosh Hashanah. You know, we think it's like this big deal, like this big day. It's like, I got to get to shul. I mean, like, you know, I grew up, you know, going to shul twice a year, or really 3 times a year, right? 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? That was the only time I ever went to synagogue growing up. And like, you had to go, just like, you know, either your parents forced you to go, or like you felt like, you know, this is like what we do as Jews. And it's such a big deal. And I think and I'm not even saying that in a negative way. I think it really speaks to the power of the day, that it draws Jews who are maybe not even so involved, you know, during the year. It draws them to come. They want to be there. They know that they have to be there. They should be there. There's something to be there for. But again, if you look in the Torah, it barely says anything. You know, it says tons about Pesach. It says a lot about Yom Kippur. It even says more about Shavuot than Rosh Hashanah. What does it say about Rosh Hashanah? Right? It says that Rosh Hashanah is Yom Teruah. Right? It calls it Yom Teruah and it calls it Yom HaZikaron. Okay? Like, that's pretty much all it says. It doesn't even tell us what to do. It doesn't even tell us to blow the shofar. Okay? As shocking as that might sound. I'm not going to get into all those details of how we know we're supposed to blow shofar. That's a whole conversation in the Talmud, right? But we learn it. It's been learned out. It's what Jews have been doing for thousands of years. We blow the shofar. But the Torah calls it Yom Teruah, which is, you know, the day of the shofar blast, right? Or the sounding, right? It doesn't even say that, you know, specifically what kind of shofar it should be. And it calls it Yom HaZikaron, and we'll get back to that Yom HaZikaron name very soon. But it's just so interesting that, again, when we look in the verses in the Torah, the one thing about Rosh Hashanah that it is, you know, connected to something specifically in the Torah, it's the shofar. Everything else, while as beautiful and moving and hopefully inspiring as it is, all the prayers and the meals and the dipping the apple in the honey, all those things are great. But the one thing and the only thing that specifically comes from the Torah, right, is the shofar blast, right, which is learned out from different verses in the way that it's, you know, spoken out. Which means that shofar on Rosh Hashanah is the central piece of the day. That is the main piece of the day. If you did nothing else, if you didn't even go to shul, you just walked to your local park and you found some Chabadnik, you know, like blowing the shofar, you connected to the most important part of the day. You connected to the most central part of the day. Now, look, I'm not saying don't go to shul. Don't get me wrong, right? But I'm just saying, what is the essential and the central part of Rosh Hashanah? It's the shofar. Why? Now let's go a little deeper. Let's try to understand what's going on with the shofar. Because I know when I was a kid, you know, we have all this nostalgia. You're in shul, you're kind of talking to your friend, and all of a sudden you hear the shofar being blown. Whoa, you know, it's like that's like the big kind of moment of the day, and then, you know, all the other blasts that come after. And it's this, you know, auditory kind of experience. But what is it about? Why do we blow a shofar? Why that on Rosh Hashanah and no other holiday? Yeah, we might blow the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. That's a custom. You don't have to do that, right? On Rosh Hashanah, the mitzvah, the thing you have to do by Jewish custom, law, tradition, is hear the shofar. Why? Right? Now it's going to go back to some things I started to bring up very quickly and late. All right? First of all, I want to preface it by saying this. A lot of people think Rosh Hashanah is the time when I start to, like, you know, tell myself, oh my God, I did that, and I did this, and I did this, and I did that, and all these things I did wrong during the year. But notice, in the prayers in Rosh Hashanah, there's none of that. That's Yom Kippur. Those are the 7 days after Rosh Hashanah. Look at the prayers carefully this year. Rosh Hashanah doesn't talk about, oh my God, all the things I did wrong this year. Okay, what is it talking about? It's talking about it. I'm going to put it like, I'm not going to quote the specific words, but I'm going to take those words and put them into one idea. It's this one concept and message that I'm starting a new year. I'm starting anew. Who do I want to be this year? Why am I here in the world? What am I here to do? What am I here to accomplish? What's going on in this world? What is life all about? These are like really big questions. All right. And Rosh Hashanah quietly asks all these questions. All right. It presents these questions and these ideas to us over the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, because the Jewish way of starting the new year is not by like going out for a good meal, getting drunk and sleeping till 12 o'clock noon the next day. The Jewish idea of starting the new year is, like we already started to say, is looking at ourselves and trying to understand ourselves better, looking back at the year that we just had, right? Looking at the year that I would like to have, see how those two connect and relate, see what things I do want to bring forward with me and what things I want to leave behind. Because we know as Jews, we're good at schlepping things around. We've been schlepping things around the world, customs and traditions, and they're beautiful for thousands of years. But in our personal lives, we shouldn't be professional schleppers. Judaism teaches us that in general, and Rosh Hashanah teaches us that specifically by saying this is a new year. You don't have to be the same person you were last year, or for 5 years, or 10 years, or 20, or 30, 40, 50 years. You're allowed to leave things in the past and not bring them into the future with you. That's the shofar. That's one of the messages of the shofar. Why? How? Because let's go back to that second name for Rosh Hashanah, Yom HaZikaron. What is Yom HaZikaron? It's the day of remembering, of memory. It's like a Jewish Memorial Day, right? But not for fallen soldiers, but for our own memories of ourselves, of who we are supposed to be and who we could be in this world, right? And so when we hear the shofar, one, we just remember, oh, right, there's something to this world. And then two, hopefully, it makes us think a little bit deeper. Okay, now that I'm already thinking a little bit deeper, who am I and who do I want to be in this world? What kind of memories can I have? Now, this might seem a little bit, I don't know, out there for people, I'm not sure. But we can go back and have memories of who we were supposed to be and who we are supposed to be in this world. If I can say, and this is according to Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, this is not my own idea. I'm not making this stuff up. This is from Jewish tradition. But of our destiny from before we were even born. Right, so we're going deep here. But Rosh Hashanah, the shofar, and myself are very deeply connected because the sound of the shofar is supposed to wake me up and remind me, Yom HaZikaron, remember, Akiva. Go back into your memory. It's in there somewhere of who you're supposed to be and what you are supposed to accomplish in this world and what you can accomplish in this world. And every single year at the beginning of the year, we go back into that space of trying to recalibrate, realign, bring back into the balance who we are and what we're doing with our lives. Right? Because, you don't have to look deep into Judaism to know that Judaism is a religion, it's a tradition, it's a path that encourages people to think beyond themselves, to think deeply about themselves and about life and about the meaning of life and why are we here, right? And how does it all make sense? And how do I fit into it? And so these are really big questions and these are really big ideas. And we're so busy during the year that we don't always get to them. So we have 2 days off on Rosh Hashanah when we get to really think about these things. When we're in shul, maybe the davening is not so inspiring for us, right? Maybe we're at home taking a break. Maybe we didn't even go to shul, right? And we're having time by ourselves. But however we choose to pass the day, celebrate the day, right? But Judaism encourages us on these 2 days of Rosh Hashanah to use them in this kind of way, right? This remembering, right, of who we are. And I want to say one last thing about Rosh Hashanah, even though there's a million more things to say. And then we'll go into Yom Kippur. Just one last thing about the shofar. Like, why the shofar? Right? There's lots of teachings, but why the shofar? Why all the things we could do to remind ourselves of these things? Why is it the shofar? Right, so one idea, and there's many ideas, but one idea is that it takes us back to Mount Sinai. Now, whether you believe Mount Sinai happened or not, it really doesn't matter for this teaching. Okay? You believe it happened? Great. You don't believe it happened? Great. That's your personal decision, right? And belief. Okay? But in Judaism, we have passed on this tradition that there was this experience at Mount Sinai. So take it as truth or take it as a story that's been told. Again, however you choose to perceive it. But the interesting thing, I think, is that according to Jewish tradition, the Jewish nation was born at Mount Sinai as a nation. We were a collective before, but we became a nation at Mount Sinai. And of the many things that took place there that were powerful and wonderful, one of the things, and another, again, essential thing, is the blowing of the shofar. Look back at the story of Mount Sinai when you have a chance. The shofar is there, the sound of the shofar. There was a sound of a shofar there. Now, who was blowing it? Okay, so according to Jewish tradition, it was God. Was it a real shofar? Let's be honest, no, right? But there was a sound of a shofar. And that, I think, is an interesting point, that Rosh Hashanah also connects to Mount Sinai. Why? Because it reminds us that we're part of a nation. It's not just about me. Up until now, I've been talking about like us as individuals, right? Who am I? What am I doing? I. But it's also about the collective. It's also about the nation, about the large community of the Jewish people around the world. What does that mean? That I'm part of this people, right? And that's another kind of part of Rosh Hashanah as well, is for us to remember, right, what it means to be part of a people in general and the Jewish people in specific. And again, that's contained in the shofar as well, taking us back to the moment that we as a people, as a nation, were born. Okay? I'm actually looking, I can't actually see the chat right now, and I'm just about to go into Yom Kippur, and I see that this question that was posted has to do with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, so I'm just reading it really quickly. If we're spending the 10 days to repent and return after Rosh Hashanah, and we look at ourselves in Rosh Hashanah, why isn't Yom Kippur before Rosh Hashanah? It kind of doesn't make sense. Why not repent and return and do tshuva and then have these decisions and have Rosh Hashanah? That's a great question. All right, really, really good question. I'll say this. I'm sure there's many different approaches to answering that question. But I believe, based on the learning I've done over the years, before I even get into my repenting and my tshuva and all that kind of stuff, I just need to remember, first and foremost, that I am a person with a purpose in this world. I am a person that is connected to a nation with a purpose in this world. I am connected to a higher mission. And while I might have forgotten that over the last 363 days of the year, I'm going to remind myself again this Rosh Hashanah of that. And then after Rosh Hashanah, then I'll get into the 7 days of repentance, as we call it, or 10 days of repentance, really. But the 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I'll really work on myself, really, and try to do tshuva and repent and return. And then I'll go into Yom Kippur for like the big day, like the Grand Slam, like the World Series of repentance. Okay, so I think it actually makes perfect sense, this order, because Rosh Hashanah has nothing to do with repentance. It's just remembered. And not just, but it's remembered of what it's all about, to the extent that we can understand that. And then I'll go into my self-improvement over the next 8 days, right, as it reaches the peak at Yom Kippur. So let's go into Yom Kippur. Okay, thank you for that question. I want to start off with a little bit of a shock, maybe. Maybe some of you have heard this before. But there's a really interesting Mishnah, okay, teaching that goes back almost 2,000 years, that says the happiest day of the year, is Yom Kippur. Okay? Jewish tradition teaches the happiest day of the year is Yom Kippur. Now, nobody told me that when I was growing up. And if they did, I wouldn't even believe them, because I was in like this uncomfortable suit, these like loafers, and it was really hot, usually still, and I was hungry. All right? And most people don't think of Yom Kippur as a happy day, but it really is. And not only is it a happy day, it's the happiest day, right? Why? Let's try to understand this. All right, first, let's do this in a few steps, okay? One of the hardest parts of Yom Kippur for most people is the fast, right? I'm not eating for an entire day, right? I have to stop eating like whatever time, 5:30, 6:30 at night. I go to shul. If I go to shul, I come home. I'm hungry. I'm used to eating before I go to bed. I can't even drink. All these things. I wake up in the morning. Oh, I'm still hungry, and I have like 12 hours of fasting before me. It's not so easy. How can I be happy, and how can I be happy with that? So I want to share one idea that maybe will help us to understand this idea. Judaism, you probably know, has many fast days. Okay, there's Tisha B'Av, there's the 17th of Tammuz, there's the fast of Gedalia that comes up right after Rosh Hashanah, and there's a couple of others. Yom Kippur is the only fast day. Check this out. It's the only fast day that has nothing to do with remembering or commemorating a destruction or sad event in Jewish history. Every other fast day that we have, there's about 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 4. Am I counting right? 3, 4. Fast of Esther, also, you can say 5. All right? 5 other fast days that have nothing to do, 5 fast days that have everything to do with a difficult moment in Jewish history, right? A moment where the Jews, experienced destruction, we're about to experience destruction, we're on their way to experiencing destruction. It's a fast day to mourn. It's a mourning day. Every other fast day in Judaism is in addition to being a fast day, it's a day of mourning. That's not Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is not a day of mourning. Right? It might feel that way because we're not eating, but it's not a day of mourning. It's not a punishment. Again, we have to go deeper into Jewish thought here, right? And this might not be the normative reality, in most synagogues and communities, but it is very present in Jewish teachings all over the place. That the fasting we do on Yom Kippur, again, it's not a punishment, it's a gift. It's a gift. How could it be a gift? Because on that day, in Yom Kippur, we're experiencing on our soul level. Now, we might not all feel that. We have to be very sensitive to be able to feel that. But we're experiencing a very great and high elevation of our soul. Okay? And because of that, we're in such an elevated spiritual level that technically you don't even need to eat. Now, I know we feel the hunger pains, of course, we all have them, right? But it's different, right? Because if we really jump into the spirit of the day, we really jump into the spirit of what Yom Kippur is or could be. Ideally, I'm talking about an ideal thing, okay? Now, we shouldn't feel bad if we ever get hungry during Yom Kippur. I'm just saying an ideal, that we won't even think about our hunger. We won't even realize our hunger. We won't even have that hunger. Because we'll be so tuned into the spiritual nature of the day that we are being nourished by the spiritual nature of Yom Kippur. Again, it's not Tisha B'Av. It's not another fast day when we're mourning. It has nothing to do with that. It is a day that we're experiencing such a spiritual high that I can't even think about that sandwich that I eat every single day at 12 o'clock, right? Because I'm in such a different space. I was in that space yesterday. I'll be in that space tomorrow. But right now, literally, I'm in a different reality. And now different parts of Yom Kippur might inspire that for different people. For some people, it's like the traditional prayers. It's being in shul all day. It's praying. It's all those different things. For other people, it's like, nah. They might be going to shul for a little bit and being at home or taking a walk. It might not even be going to shul. It could be taking your own time somewhere else in a different kind of way, whatever speaks to you, right? But there is a spiritual nature of the day that is very, very powerful. Right? And that plays into the happiness, the joy aspect of Yom Kippur, but there's more. All right? Why? All right, a lot of the Hasidic teachers and the Kabbalistic masters will teach us, and they did teach us, and I'll put it into modern day terms by modern day teachers who say that Yom Kippur is a 25-hour car wash for the soul. Okay? Is a 25-hour car wash for the soul. Okay? Just think about when you were a kid and you went through a car wash. Or maybe you've even done it recently as an adult and you still enjoyed it so immensely. You know the feeling of your car going in dirty and coming out so clean? It's a real feeling. Like it's a joy. It's a happiness. I come out, I see my car, I'm like, oh, that feels so good. And it's not even my body, it's my car. And if someone vacuums the inside, oh my God, it's even better. I feel like a king. I got a clean car inside and out. Friends, that's what's happening on Yom Kippur. You don't even have to do anything for it to happen. Now, I know we have like 1,000,000 pages of prayer, and this might be a weird thing to say, from, a Jew who went and got Orthodox rabbinic ordination. All right, but I will say that it doesn't even matter if you say any prayers on Yom Kippur. It still happens. You want to pray all the prayers? Go for it. You want to pray none of the prayers? Go for it. That will still happen on a very sublime level. On Yom Kippur, our souls are being cleansed. Cleansed up from what? From all the things that we did, that we shouldn't have done, that we could have done better, that we should have done different. All the things, the speech, the thoughts, the actions of the past year. We all have them from every single day of the year. Right? But our tradition, and I'm really sensitive about the way I speak. For some people, it's God who says, and for other people, it's the tradition says it, so whatever speaks to you. But Judaism says that, once a year, we get a gift where we get to become cleansed of all that schmutz, the spiritual schmutz that we picked up from the whole year, from all those things that we did that we shouldn't have done. Now, of course, there are things that we need to do. If I wronged somebody, I need to make amends. I have to amend that. I have to say sorry. If someone, God forbid, stole something, they have to return it. Of course, there's things you need to do. Not just like come to Yom Kippur and say, yay, I'm a pure soul once again, although on some level that does happen. Right? But if you wronged a person, Judaism is very clear that you need to fix that. Fix that. Okay? But it is, again, a very prominent Jewish teaching that on Yom Kippur we go through this car wash, so to speak, for the soul. And we come out and we're totally clean. And that's what makes Yom Kippur the happiest day of the year. Because again, think of the joy that you have when your car gets cleaned. Imagine your soul, imagine your life, imagine your being, imagine who you are. It's an unbelievable feeling. Or could be or should be. Right? And it goes back to this idea that I just very quickly started to mention. This idea that I don't have to be stuck in the past. I don't have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Influenced anymore by my past, by who I was in the past. I can start again. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, separately and combined, are coming to teach us that you can start all over again. It's a new year. The old year is gone. It's in the past. It doesn't exist anymore. Don't be trapped by the past. Don't be a prisoner to your past. And this has many, many different ramifications, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, right? This is a very, very deep teaching of Judaism, that I can free myself from my past. Now, I'm sure every single one of us here can think of things in our own lives that we continue to do, even though we don't really want to be doing them, but we just feel so stuck in that way, in that behavior, in that habit, whatever it might be. I think most, if not all, human beings have it. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur comes and says, you don't have to. Going back to what I said before, you don't have to schlep that thing into another year. You want to schlep that thing again? Really? Is it serving you? Is it really making you into the person you want to be? Is it making you the best person you can be? If not, then why are you taking it with you again? You've taken it with you for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 35 years. You can stop right now. Leave it behind. And again, Yom Kippur, we're being cleansed. We're starting anew. We're starting fresh, right? When your car is clean and it looks amazing and smells amazing, it feels like it just came out of the lot when you bought it the first day, right? Nothing ever happened to it. Starting all over again. And that's a really deep teaching of Yom Kippur, right? And that, again, adds to the happiness. All right, I'm going to add just one more thing, maybe one or two things about Yom Kippur, and then we'll go on to Sukkot. Okay. Now, I said in Rosh Hashanah The only thing that really is from the Torah is the shofar. Right? And if you look back thousands of years ago in Jewish tradition, when we had a temple in Jerusalem 2 different times for over 400 times each time, there were sacrifices every single day of the year, no matter what the day was, and there were a few extra sacrifices on Rosh Hashanah. But again, the only thing that really made Rosh Hashanah different in the temple in Jerusalem was the shofar. On Yom Kippur, all right, I think this is interesting. Let's go back thousands of years ago before Jews developed synagogues and structured prayer, which was only 2,000 years ago. Only 2,000 years ago, right? Before that, we didn't have synagogues and we didn't have structured prayer. Okay, the only reason prayer was developed in Judaism, and then eventually became what we know of prayer today, prayer books, how to pray, what to say, what to do, 3 times a day, all that kind of stuff. That was only as a result of the destruction of the first temple, 2,600 years ago. And that was a very, very slow development. I mean, it took around 1,000 years to get to what it is today. All right. But once upon a time, Judaism had no synagogues. It had no structured sense of prayer. So then what was Jewish prayer? And that's another topic. I'm not here to talk about Jewish prayer. I just need it for the context. Jewish prayer was from your heart. Right? You were told to pray once a day from your heart in your own words. That was it. And say the Shema. That was prayer. Right? From the Torah, it says say the Shema morning and night and pray from your heart once a day. Right? Why am I saying that? Because if we go back 3,000 years ago, let's go back, 3,000 years ago when the first temple stood. Yom Kippur for the Jewish nation was like a day off from work and not eating, right? And probably some introspection. There was no synagogues, there was no organized prayer, and they probably just sat at home, not eating or drinking, not working, hopefully thinking about life and all those spiritual ideas we brought up, and that's it. But they knew that something very special was happening in Jerusalem. That was the center stage for Yom Kippur back in ancient Judaism. Without going into all the details, and there's tons of them, in Jerusalem in the temple on Yom Kippur, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, he did all kinds of very special rituals in the temple on this day. And they all had tons of different spiritual meaning. The most important and the most powerful thing that the high priest did in Jerusalem, in the temple, on Yom Kippur, was to go into a section of the temple that nobody was ever allowed into any other day of the year. That was an inner chamber of the temple called the Holy of the Holies. Right? It literally was a room. It had the Ark of the Covenant in it in the first temple. It was empty in the second temple because that Ark got either hidden away or stolen. And the high priest would go in there and do special rituals and say special prayers. One day of the year, one person was allowed to go in. He went in 5 times on Yom Kippur. Why am I mentioning that? It's ancient history. I'm mentioning that because there's a teaching in there for us. We learn from the teachers of our tradition that just like the high priest would go into the Holy of the Holies, the innermost sanctuary of the temple on Yom Kippur, so too we are encouraged to go into our own inner sanctuary on Yom Kippur, to go into our Holy of the Holies, right? To go as deep as we possibly can to once again, like we said before, think about who we are. Repent for all those things we did wrong. Like really commit to being the best person we can be, because we know on some level, like we see the light, so to speak, on Yom Kippur of who we really can be in the world. And we get excited by that. And that brings, again, that's another element of the joy and happiness of Yom Kippur. Again, like this, another level of a wake-up call that began on Rosh Hashanah. Right? And when we go into our own inner sanctuary, okay, I got this. I remember who Akiva is supposed to be in this world. I'm ready to go. I want to do this. Right? Let's go. Let's do it. That takes us into our third and final part of the sharing in that Sukkot. Because we're so, revved up from Yom Kippur, we think Judaism would say, now go into the year. You just took 10 days, the first 10 days of the year, working on yourself, repenting, making promises, new commitments, fasting for a whole day, go get them, go jump into the year. And that's not what happens. We have 12 more days before we do that. We just took 10 days of really intense personal spiritual work. And now Judaism's like, we got 12 more days to come, but it's a different kind of work. All right, first of all, 4 days to get your sukkah up, okay, and buy your 4 species. All right, so we have 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. And then we get to Sukkot. And it's like, what's happening? Like, I'm ready to jump into the year. Now I have to take a whole week to celebrate a holiday? Like, come on, give me a break. I'm going to lose this, like, motivation. I'm going to lose this, momentum. Judaism's like, you're not going to lose it. Don't worry. Right? Because what we're going to do on Sukkot now, the final phase of this Jewish spiritual journey at the beginning of the year, is actually going to help you to really jump into the year in the best way possible. How is that so? Let me share a couple of things. All right, so first of all, on some level, actually, it's good to say this first. The first 10 days of the year from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, deeply spiritual. We just talked about very deep spiritual ideas. Sukkot comes, and it's like, buy the 4 species, make a cool little hut, cook your favorite foods, invite friends and family over, spend as much time as you can in the sukkah having meals and, celebrations and, whatever, I know some people like to play music in the sukkah. Some people like to bring their couch and their TV in the sukkah, whatever it is for you, right? But Sukkot, if you look at it, though, yes, of course, there are spiritual teachings behind it. It is Judaism after all. It's so physical compared to the first 10 days of the year. I mean, it always hits me. Right after Yom Kippur, I'm going out and I'm looking for my lulav and etrog. I'm building my sukkah. I just went from 10 days of like intense spirituality with Yom Kippur at the peak, and now I'm like Mr. Physicality, right? And sometimes I'm like wondering, like, how'd that happen so quickly? I'm like building my sukkah. I'm like looking for the lulav and etrog. I'm getting all the things ready for the holiday. What just happened to the deep spirituality? And that's exactly the point. I'm sure some of you are already thinking in your own minds the answer to that. That is spirituality. That's the highest level of spirituality in Judaism, is bringing it into the physical world. Not just leaving it on top of a mountain or some yoga class or some yoga center, right? But bringing it into the everyday physical world. And Sukkot reminds us of that. Our tradition says, okay, now take 7 days, right? Be in the sukkah, have the 4 species, eat those yummy foods, celebrate. It's a celebration now. Okay, it's like a real feast for 7 days, right? Feast of the Tabernacle. And be in this world, but with all of those spiritual insights, realizations, thoughts that came to you during the first 10 days of the year. Intertwine them. Bring them together, combine them. Judaism is all about combining the spiritual and the physical. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in a class we had about Kabbalah, but that's one reason why the Jewish star, the Magen David, is the way it is. What's the Jewish star? It's a triangle pointing up, overlapped with a triangle pointing down, pointing up to heaven, pointing down to earth, heaven and earth, spirituality and physicality combined as one. That's Judaism. And again, not to look down at other traditions, but there are other traditions that are purely focused on the spiritual. Forget the physical world. That's not Judaism. Judaism is, yes, be as spiritual as you can, but in the physical world. And Sukkot comes to teach us that, to remind us that, to remember that, and to help us to do that. Maybe just a couple more things. I've shared a lot so far, and I want to leave some time if there's any thoughts or questions that people have. I think two more things I'll share. One is, why a sukkah? Why am I living in a sukkah? Why can't I do that in my house? Everything I just said. Give me my bed, give me my couch. I can feel physical in my kitchen. Why do I have to go move out into a sukkah? So one idea is also, it's to remind us not to get lost in the physicality. That while, yes, Judaism encourages that mix, that combination of spiritual and physical, we must remember that the spiritual must take the lead, and that the physical is but a tool and an aid to achieve our goals as individuals and as a nation and as a world. That we shouldn't get lost in the physical, right? So we move out for a whole week, and I live in this little simple hut. No matter how big my house is, I live in a little simple hut, and I have all my meals there. I sleep there, and I remember that, yeah, this is, on some level, this is all I need, right? The simplicity of life, at least for a week. It's also interesting to note that Sukkot aligns with, in the ancient Jewish world, where almost everybody was farmers, Sukkot is a harvest festival. So specifically at the time when everybody was bringing in their harvest and their bounty, and they feel, wow, look at this. All that hard work just paid off. And they're just feeling so full and overflowing with physical blessings. Specifically at that time, they go and they move into a little hut to remind them, yeah, the blessings are great. They're wonderful. Use them well. But it's not the end-all be-all. Don't end at the physical, right? And that, again, is one teaching behind the Sukkah. And I'll end with one last teaching from Sukkot. And one of the things I love about Judaism is that I feel like everything and anything, almost, if not entirely, ends up talking about the universal aspect of Judaism. Right? Literally, you can start with anything and end up with a universal teaching. And Sukkot is the epitome of that. Okay, Sukkot, well, it seems like such a Jewish holiday, right? I remember, I didn't grow up religious, so, I didn't do these things growing up. But a year after college, just before I went to Israel, so I graduated college, I spent a year teaching in New York City, and then I went to Israel, and that's where I became, a more deeply connected Jewishly. But during that year, I lived in Yonkers, and I took a bus every day to work, and I always went to Riverdale on my way to work. And during Sukkot, I'd see the guys, holding their lulav and etrog. It always seemed like so kind of strange to me, even though I was Jewish also. It wasn't part of my life. And it was so interesting to see. And so the reason I just started that, and the reason I bring that up is because Sukkot is so Jewish. Like, what other tradition? Like, you live in a hut for a week, and you take 4 species and you wave them together every day. Like, it's such a Jewish thing. But it's such a universal thing as well, which is a very Jewish thing. See what we just said? It's such a Jewish thing, but it's also a universal thing, which is also a very Jewish thing. All right? How is Sukkot universal? 2 ways. One, when we're waving the lulav and etrog. Now, again, when I was a kid, and I saw people wave the lulav and etrog, or maybe one time during Sukkot, I went to Hebrew school, and they had us wave the lulav and etrog. 2 seconds, you're done. You're like, okay, And later in life, when I was learning, deeper about Judaism and what we do and why we do it, I learned incredible spiritual teachings about Sukkot. Really blew my mind. And one of the things is that when we're waving the 4 species, the lulav, the etrog, the myrtle, forgetting the English things here, but when we wave them, right? Our avot hadassim, there's one English word I'm forgetting here. Maybe someone can put it in the chat. But when we're waving the 4 species, we're waving them in the 4 directions. Okay, we're told to wave them in the 4 directions, and then also up and also down. So really the 6 directions. Why? One reason, is because we want to bring blessing and illustrate the fact that we want to bring blessing to the entire world. That when I'm waving the lulav and the etrog, it's not just about me, it's not just about my family, it's not just about my people, it's about the entire world. All the goodness that I spent the first 10 days of the year praying for, I want that for the entire world. And I show that not through my mouth, not through prayers, but through my actions. You hear that? Through my actions. I'm waving the lulav and the etrog in the 4 directions, not to forget the world, the big old world out there. And that if I'm going to bring blessing to the world, I need to do it through action. I need to take action. I need to do something. That's one way Sukkot is very universal. And the second way, this is the last thing I'm going to say for now, unless I think of something else to say. Stop, I'm just kidding. Is that if you look in the Torah and its description of what happens on Sukkot, it's very interesting. Okay, every regular day of the year, going back to the temple and the things that would happen there were daily sacrifices. Okay, every day of the year was the same sacrifice, the same kind of animals, the same number, the same time of the day. Shabbat, you had some extras. All right, Pesach, you had some extras. Shavuot, you had some extras. Sukkot is the only holiday where the extra animals that are brought in honor of the holiday happen in a different number every single day. Okay? On Pesach, the extra animals, it's the same number of extra animals every single day. Okay? Only on Sukkot, it's a different number every day. It starts with 14 and it goes all the way down to 7. Okay? And when you get to the last day, you count up all the extra animals that were brought in the honor of Sukkot. Wait, hold on a second. 12, 10, 9, 8, 7. Sorry, 13. It starts with 13 and goes down to 7. All right, do the math. 13 plus 12 all the way down to 7. You'll get 70. Okay, what is 70 in Judaism? 70 is the number of original nations in the world. Right, even though we have almost 200, is it almost 200 or over 200 nations in the world today? Right, back in the day, according to Jewish tradition, there were 70 original nations, and the 70 extra animals that are brought on Sukkot are for the 70 nations. We bring sacrifice. What we did, we brought sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem, our holiest place. We brought for the nations. It was the only time of the year we ever did that we brought sacrifices on behalf of the non-Jews in the world. Right? One of the most universal things that happened in Judaism, right? And that happened on Sukkot. And I just want to say that I think it's beautiful and gorgeous that this holiday season that starts with, Elul, and every day working on ourselves and blowing the shofar, and we're like, oh my God, the end of the year is coming, and the New Year, the end of the year is coming, and the New Year is coming. And then we get to Rosh Hashanah, these 2 days, and the shofar, and all the things that we said about that. Then we have 7 days of working on ourselves and repenting and trying to be better people. Then we come to Yom Kippur, which is this, very powerful, beautiful, and spiritual day. And then we get to Sukkot, and by the end of Sukkot, we have offered up, so to speak, 70 sacrifices on behalf of the nations. The last kind of moment of Sukkot is reminding us, before we now really jump into the year, which we're about to, as soon as Sukkot is over, don't forget, it's not just about you. It's not just about your people. It's really about the whole world. Right? And that is something that is present in every aspect of Judaism. No matter how specific it might seem, or how, Jewish it might seem, the deeper and deepest idea is to make the world a better place. Tikkun olam, letaken et haolam. Right? And Sukkot is the epitome of that, is the model teacher of that. That really, all these Jewish things we just did with the shofar and the fasting and the sukkah and the 4 species and everything, it's really about making this world a better place for everybody. And that, I think, is the most Jewish thing we can possibly say. So thank you everyone so much for being here, for coming out to be part of the class. Appreciate being invited again to share. I'm still here. I know there were some questions I didn't get to. If anybody has new questions, you can put it in the chat and you could comment on it. Should I just look through the chat here?
Thank you so much, Akiva. That was brilliant as usual. And I know I want to watch it a second time already. So thank you. A lot to think about that I've never thought about in this coming year. I definitely think that we should look at the questions that were written first before everyone unmutes and asks questions. I know you answered a couple.
Let's see. with permission, I'm not going to get into the whole buses thing in Israel. That gets too political. So I'm going to leave that one to the side.
Yeah, there
If
was
the shofar is so important to the holiday, why don't we blow it on Shabbat when it is one of the days of? Oh, good question, Bob. So it's a really an interesting answer. When Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, which can only be the first day, we don't blow shofar. Very good. And the very direct and technical answer is because one of the laws of Shabbat is that you can't carry in a public domain, or you can't transfer an object from a public domain to a private domain unless you have an eruv, right? The eruv, that string on the poles around the area, that makes everything into public domain, and then you can carry it, right? Where I live in Happiest in Israel, there's an eruv around their entire town, 35,000 people, and you can carry everywhere. Pretty much anywhere in Israel, any town, city, kibbutz, moshav, you can even see it on the beach in Tel Aviv, has an eruv. So the rabbis, the sages, many years ago were afraid that when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, that in a place where there was no eruv, somebody would take the shofar from their house, carry it through the public domain, and bring it to the synagogue, breaking the law of Shabbat. So even though it is a mitzvah, it's a commandment for Rosh Hashanah, they didn't think it overruled breaking Shabbat, so they said, we'll push it off to the next day. So that's the technical reason behind that.
A lot of people were asking me privately how to see this later as well, and I've messaged them.
Amazing. Just as I'm looking through, I'm just going to put my website in again at the end of the chat, becomingisraeli.com/@Israel. You can sign up for my newsletter there. You can see some online courses that I offer. The ones you'll see, you click on Israel School, they're specifically for youth. But in the next couple of days, I'm going to be adding a course specifically for adults. It's called Israel Inspiration for Adults. It's a 6-class series online via Zoom once a week on Sundays. And it's all about Israeli history, culture, and society, learning the story about Israel's establishment, survival, and success. So you'll see it on the website in a couple of days at the link I shared. Let's see over here. Hold on 1 second, I'm having a hard time going up into the chat. Here we go. The lulav and etrog also seems such an indigenous tribal exercise. Each year feels so nice. Yeah, I love it. 100% Gail. I agree with you 100%. It's a very ancient and indigenous tribal kind of ritual in Judaism. So I don't see any other
questions, but if everyone wants to, you're happy. No, I can talk.
Can I ask a question verbally?
Go ahead.
Ask questions. Feel free to do that now.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. It's interesting. I know Rosh Hashanah is Yom HaZikaron, and there's a whole section in the Musaf, about Zichronot. But it's interesting that we remember our dead on Yom Kippur, not on Rosh Hashanah. And the name of the prayer is even Yizkor, to remember. And even if you say you're going to judge the dead also on Yom Kippur, but we also, are they judged every time we say Yizkor? They're not, because we say Shmini Atzeret and the last day of Pesach and Shavuot, I believe, as well. So it's interesting why we remember the dead on Rosh Hashanah on a day of remembrance and not on Yom Kippur, unless we do it just to keep ourselves in shul longer so we won't go home and eat. But that's the only explanation I have. Would you know of any reason the rabbis formulated the prayer like that? Or
it's a good question.
You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I know. I totally understand what you're asking. I've never seen something specifically speaking about that, but I'm just going to take a guess based on my understanding of the day. Is that Rosh Hashanah is a very, very unique day. I'll say that Rosh Hashanah is also Rosh Chodesh, right? It's the first day of the month. Right. It's the first day of the year. It's the first day of the month. Yeah, but we don't say Hallel. Yeah. We don't say Hallel.
Right.
Right? Which we say every Rosh Chodesh. The Shabbat before Rosh, hold on 1 second. The Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh is called Shabbat Mevorchim, right? Where we say a special prayer for the upcoming new month.
I say it every month.
This Shabbat coming up, like tomorrow, is we don't have that. It's the only it's the only time of the year. Why? Because Rosh Hashanah is a completely different reality. It's not tied to the past. It's not, it's a new beginning. Going back to what we said before, it's such a new beginning that it's not connected to certain rituals that we would expect it to be. So that's one guess, thought that I'm sharing with.
Sure.
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure if it's a day of remembrance, so I thought that's when we should be remembering, but it's all right. I mean,
okay. I think it's also so focused on remembering, like I was saying before, remembering, us, ourselves, who we are in the world, that maybe, and again, I haven't seen this, but maybe the sages who formulated the prayers, I think was a time to also remember the dead. But I'm just saying that kind of off the cuff.
Thank you. Okay. Have a good Yontif.
Thank you. Good Yontif. I like hearing that because people don't say that here.
I should say.
Shana Tova.
Feel
free to, yeah. Oh, here in the chat?
Say something? Who just said something, Steve?
Yeah, I just wonder if there are any other questions for Akiva.
Larry left a question.
Can you comment on the present connection between the high holidays and the present pandemic? Look, I mean, the one thing I would say, I think we can talk about that for days and weeks also, but I'll just share one quick thought. And it kind of goes off of something I mentioned before. I think it reminds us about the essential aspect of these days. That we grow up, we live our lives for so many years and decades, thinking that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is all about doing, certain rituals and being in certain places, specifically synagogue, shul. And then the pandemic hits and we can't be in those places, at least, not like we normally have been. And it reminds us that, that's not the essential part of the day. Again, I'm not someone who's knocking shul. I like going to shul on Rosh Hashanah. I love being in shul all day on Yom Kippur. I used to go to a shul on Yom Kippur where the break, I'm not even kidding you. I'm not kidding. The break during the day was 5 minutes, all right, between Musaf and Mincha. That's how long we prayed. But I think the pandemic in general is trying to, if there's anything positive about it, which obviously there's a lot of, real hardship and pain, but maybe, one positive thing we can extract from this whole like ongoing and continuing to go on experience is, asking ourselves, which is very connected to what we've been talking about. What is essential? What is really essential and what's really important in life, right? And when we come to the high holidays, we always thought, go to shul, Rosh Hashanah, 2 days, Yom Kippur, all these things. Like that's how I do Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. But I think we learned today, hopefully, that, all the things I mentioned, even the shofar, I don't need a shul. I don't need a synagogue to do, right? Now, look, of course, it's nice to see people. It's nice to be with people. There's a power in being with community. I'm not knocking that at all. But when we can't do that, right, I think it reminds us of what we still can do. And oftentimes what we still can do is really the more essential piece of the whole thing to begin with. That's one thought I would share about that.
Right. Well, thank you, Akiva, very much. Many of us are going through trying times this year in particular, looking forward. It's kind of dismal. I appreciate your bringing clarity to the way we should perhaps refocus some of our direction and take a new breath along with the new year. Thank you very much. This, I think, is your third presentation for us. So everybody applauds your fortuitous sticking with us.
And please make sure to check out his website.
Yes.
And see what he's working on. His new
Thank
project.
you. I do have an announcement regarding next Thursday, which is exactly 1 hour behind 1 week from now. And that is, we will be discussing cemeteries of all things, but it'll be brought to life in regard to the identity of the living. And we'll be working from the Herzl Cemetery and his grave and such. So we look forward to that presentation in 1 week. We will now enter into our schmooze period, which is able to last as long as folks want to schmooze. All topics are on the table. Everybody's a gentleman and a gentle lady. And we have had 8 very successful schmoozes over the course of the summer. And I'm very proud of the way our organization of volunteers here were able to cover a broad series of topics. And everybody, I think, learned something. Plus, we had the social togetherness. So we are officially into schmooze now. And
if I can just jump in really quickly and say thank you, everybody, again, so much. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Alana. And thank you, everybody. It was really a pleasure for me to be here. I really appreciate it. I shared a lot of big ideas and topics. And if you ever want to get in touch with me, if that's in 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 years, I just put my email address in the chat, akivagersh@yahoo.com. Always, always, always feel free to reach out to me. As you can probably tell, I love talking about these kinds of things. And I would love to continue the conversation with anyone and everyone. So all the best and Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. And I also wanted to mention that it's a Pay What You Wish program. And I put the information for Julia, our usual host, her PayPal at the bottom. And anything you send her this time will go straight to Akiva. So please donate if you can. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Akiva.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Okay.
He's great. I love
I
him.
love him.
yeah,
I want to hang out with him.
gonna be a group.
Guy. He's so passionate about what he talks about.
Yeah,
He doesn't need to have a slide, he just talks.
that's right. You never did use the slide either.
Yeah. Does
Yeah.
Marcia have anything to say about this, Steve? I see she's back there. I don't know.
Let me check with her. What?
Steve, that's the wrong side. Wrong
Oh,
side.
sorry, right.